Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on a Media Ops, DevOps.com roundtable special event webinar. And this is one of our recurring series in the DevOps Unbound series. For those of you who may not be familiar with DevOps Unbound is a bi-weekly video series exploring really just different frontiers in DevOps, different subjects in DevOps. It typically features 4 to 6 panel members, including myself as host and my co-host, Mitchell Ashley, CEO of Accelerated Strategies Group. And we do a fairly deep dive into an area of DevOps. And then once a month, we do these roundtables where we expand our panel to have 6, 7, sometimes 8. So today is 7, I believe. Experts or leaders to discuss a given topic within DevOps. But what's really nice is we throw it open to you, the audience, excuse me, to participate in it and to help us explore this area and maybe answer questions and so forth. Before I get into our panel, though, I want to talk a little bit about this question session and how you can participate and help chart and steer today's roundtable, and hopefully to help you as much as you can. For most of you, we do use GoToWebinar here, and for most of you, that means your GoToWebinar control panel somewhere on your screen, maybe the top right-hand section of your screen, and you'll see there's different sections of that control panel. There's really only 2 or 3 sections that we're going to focus in on for you today. One is the one marked questions. And if you wouldn't mind locating that questions panel and maybe hitting the caret or arrow to make it point downwards and expand the section, you can see that you can type your question in there. We haven't set aside the end of the day where you got to wait here 15 minutes to hear your question. You can ask your questions in real time. We are going to try to work them in real time. We'll be doing questions throughout today's presentation, throughout today's roundtable. But more than that, by putting your question in there, number one, if it's something that maybe is not for the whole panel, but one of our panel members can answer you privately, via it's kind of a text-based interface, we could answer you that way. We could bring it up for the whole panel to discuss. Or if we get so many questions that we can't answer them all, we do have a record of it here, and we'll send you a question or an answer after the fact via email if we have to. But your questions are important, and we're here to answer them, and we're here to discuss those topics. So please use the question section of the control panel to communicate with myself and our panel members. However, if you're having a technical issue, maybe the audio is not playing well, or the screen went blank, or whatever happened, but you can still get to that chat section of your GoToWebinar control panel. We do have folks standing by who'll try to help you, right? We want you to get the most out of this. So if you have a technical issue, but you can get to chat, go to there and put that in there. We'll help you out there. The other thing is, I will tell you that, yes, we are recording this. Yes, it will be available on demand, usually within just a few hours of us wrapping up here today. So I think that's really all you need to know right now. We're not going to be doing any polling questions. We have a lot to cover. We've got a really great topic for today's roundtable here on DevOps Unbound. And I also want to mention DevOps Unbound is sponsored by our friends at Tricentis. Many thanks to Tricentis for sponsoring not just today's roundtable, but the entire DevOps Unbound series of roundtables and videos. So let's dive into today. Today's topic is the reality of testing in DevOps. Testing has gotten a little bit of a black eye within the DevOps world, it seems, because it's routinely cited as the #1 source of DevOps delays, right? Coding is happening a million miles an hour, testing not so much, so they say. Defects are still a major issue for 48% of DevOps team. We approach testing the wrong way. For all of our success, have we really succeeded? Have we failed to scale and or accelerate it properly? What do we need to rethink? What should we keep? How do we not throw our babies with the bathwater? How could we do better testing? I couldn't think of a better panel to approach these questions with. I'm going to introduce each of them and allow them to give you a little bit of their background. And I will mention that, in our panel, we try to get practitioners as well as vendors. And sometimes practitioners, are not at liberty to say the enterprises or companies they work for. And please understand that, because I'd rather have really smart people here talking to us than having to give us, information that they can't give. So bear with that. But that being said, let me kick things off with Adam. And Adam, I hope I don't mess up your last name, but it's Arakilian.
Nice, there you go.
That's 2 for 2, I've gotten it right. Director of Engineering at Dell EMC. Adam, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, everybody. How are you? I play a role in a DevOps group in a major organization at Dell called the Infrastructure Server Group. And one of the challenges that we have is around continuity between our 50 plus different product groups across a 10 to 12,000 engineering group, and how do we test and how do we run DevOps consistently? And I'm really excited to be here and be able to talk about some of the things that are happening from a testing perspective in DevOps, and it's great to be part of this conversation. So looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Let me next introduce you to Miriam Makshanoff, Senior QA Engineer at Calendly. Miriam, hi, thanks, welcome for being here. Please introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you, and good job on the last name. You're really killing it.
Well, Makshanoff's more in my wheelhouse, I got to be honest with you, but go ahead.
So I've worked at Calendly for about 2.5 years now. I've been in tech for about 8 years. My degree is in psychology, kind of fell in love with tech along the way, worked in kind of a variety of roles of customer support, doing usability testing, manual testing, software development, you name it. Love a little bit of everything about it. And then at Calendly, where I'm at now, we're trying to focus on kind of ramping up the QA team on automation, and then really trying to understand how we can best cooperate between development and QA to understand, what works best to strategize what we're testing and to, have that full suite in a very agile environment. So that's me. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Next up is someone we've had the pleasure of joining us now on we've spoken at a couple of our virtual events, a couple of videos, and here with us today is Abel Wang, Principal Cloud Advocate and DevOps Lead at Microsoft. Abel, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Abel. I've been writing code for over 20 years now. That's pretty much what I love to do, right? I eat, drink, and live writing code. So I'm one of those people. But after suffering some really embarrassing quality issues, let's just say, rather public ones too, I became a very rabid proponent for quality in a DevOps world, and especially from a dev's perspective.
Excellent. Thanks, Abel. Appreciate it. Next up, we have, let's go to Clint Sprov, Director of Product Marketing, Tricentis, and Clint's held a variety of roles. Clint, why don't you give them a little background?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Again, my name is Clint Sprov. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Tricentis. Prior to Tricentis, I've held a variety of roles. But prior to Tricentis, I was actually with GitLab as a Senior Solutions Architect. So the goal there was to really get more hands-on experience with DevOps as a practitioner versus kind of my previous role as a sales engineer for a lot of the other software testing companies. So the goal for me was to really make sure that when I joined product marketing, that I could have a realistic view of talking about not only testing, but how testing can really be done in DevOps. So part of the goal with a company like Tricentis, what we try to do is we have a variety of customers of various skill sets, and our goal is to help them with a realistic transformation into DevOps. So part of my goal is to help not only shape that message, but bring some reality to that as well. So thank you. Glad to be here with this awesome panel.
Thank you. All right, up next we have Hillary Weaver-Robb. She's a senior software engineer in testing. Hillary, if you want to give a little background.
Sure. So I'm Hillary Weaver-Robb. So I've been in the software and testing space really for about 13 years now. I work on a team of 8 software engineers and a product owner and myself working on like 5 or 6 projects at once. So I have like these small little ecosystems of DevOps stuff going on within one team. So it's really interesting. And I have a lot of varied experience just by being on this one really weird team. So, and happy to be here.
Thank you. All right, and then last but not least, my co-host on DevOps Unbound, Mitchell Ashley, CEO, Accelerated Strategies Group. Mitchell, a little background?
Yeah, good to be here. I guess my role here is after my software days, and by the way, I love testers, some of my most favorite people. I was usually the person, have been the person that this test team comes to and says, do we ship with this in the product, either as the development manager or the product owner or something like that. So I've gotten to work with the whole team in the QA process and the evolution to DevOps. So glad to be here and excited to be here with this fantastic team.
Fantastic. All right, guys, we got past all that. Now let's jump into it. So for whatever reason, and it kind of I didn't realize it till I realized it. Testing has become sort of the whipping boy of DevOps, right? Oh, that's why we're not going faster, or that as if faster is equated with better all the time. But that's what's holding us up. That's why we're not seeing better quality. Rightfully so. Are we getting a bad rap here? Why all of a sudden are people kind of crapping on testing, right? What gives?
Well, I don't think it's all of a sudden.
No.
I do think that's been the situation for a long time. In my whole experience in QA, it's trying to fight the battle of we need QA. So I don't think that's a new issue that's arisen. I think you really have to have an organization that focuses on quality as a primary goal. And a lot of companies make that a secondary goal of we want to ship first and worry about quality later. So you really have to start that from the top of making that a priority, so it's not the whipping boy. And I know it can be done.
Yeah,
go ahead, Hillary.
Being QA for 13 years, yeah, it's not new. But from my experience with a lot of teams is that, oh, DevOps is going to fix all of our problems, so we'll just do that. Or, you know, it's like they don't, I don't know, they just think it's a magic pill for everything, but there's still, yeah, you have to have the mindset that quality doesn't just happen.
There's something that sums it up for me. I think all of the test books will appreciate. The developer said to me once, well, if it works in production, it would have worked in test.
Uh-huh.
I just walked away. What do you say after that?
I do think it comes back down to, obviously there's business pressures, right? So I come from a background of product delivery, right? And I've been doing DevOps now for about 5 years or so. And while we continue to have a business pressure, we have to have clear metrics and what really defines quality, right? And they have to be, and there's objectivity there, right? But there's also subjectivity, right? So I can't really objectify or clearly say, hey, this user experience looks good without actually going through and doing it. But then again, I can test my function and make sure that I have 85% unit test coverage, right? And so I think a major part of it is, yeah. So I don't think generally speaking, DevOps has given a testing sort of a bad name. I think it's always sort of been something that products that are trying to see how much quality they can get away with to make their product be good enough to ship. And especially in a cloud environment, a major difference is we see those results, immediately. Like Abel, you work in Microsoft. If you guys are deploying, especially with your 360 Outlook, or I should say Office suite, I'm going to assume constantly, right? So the second you make the second you interject a bug, everybody sees it. So that quality has to be really tight. It's got to be really, really solid right there. And I think we're beginning to see that shift from, hey, quality is sort of a phase to, hey, quality is, it's immediate. It has to start at the very beginning. And DevOps is helping to play a role in sort of exposing that. Many organizations are not doing that today.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I would even
it
add,
absolutely needs to start from the very, very beginning, right? But this isn't a new problem. Like, I can think back to when I first started writing code like a bajillion years ago. Everyone was always like, oh, when do we need to ship? Oh, well, if we stop doing testing, can't we ship faster? Like, people have been saying this since day one. And I remember when I was a fairly young engineer, there was some CEO that, he got in everyone's face. It was just like a gigantic company-wide meeting saying, this year, quality is going to be our priority. And then somebody stood up and said, well, quality comes at a price, right? You don't just get it for free. We need to have quality, but it comes at a price. And the price is you have to test. You have to spend the time and the effort to test. So this was back way before we even knew what a unit test was, right? So that has always stuck with me. And the overriding consensus now is you cannot scrimp on quality because, again, so much of Microsoft stuff is in the cloud now. And like Adam said, if we push a bug out there, everybody sees it. So quality is even more important now in a DevOps world than ever before, right? We used to have 3 years release cycles. Man, you had plenty of time to test. You had plenty of time to figure things out. And you even had plenty of time to fix your bugs even when it got into production, right? So yeah, the world is really different, but quality is not a second-class citizen. You have to build it into your application from day one.
yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I think that regardless of the methodology, testing has always been that whipping boy, right? Because it's always testing that has to adapt to those new methodologies when they're released. Someone says, hey, we're going to do rapid application development. We're going to do agile. How much testing can you do within a sprint? Now we're going to go to DevOps where everything is continuous. So when we do that, testing has to kind of retrofit how it works. How are we organized? Are we a separate QA team? Are we a center of excellence? Now do we have to become developers? So there's always that really continuous learning and continuous adjustment for those QA teams. But I think though, as we kind of move forward and we're starting to see the advancements, it goes beyond really the tools. It's really understanding how do you take a organization of testers of multiple skill sets and how do you apply them into DevOps properly? Or how do you train or get those people in the organization to be able to contribute to that process so that testing isn't kind of always the bottleneck or the assumed bottleneck, because everyone is at a different stage when it comes to their DevOps maturity and on their journey. And so that's what I see a lot of times when I'm talking with customers and in their transition to the execution of DevOps.
Sure. Abel, Manish in the audience, commented, well said, quality does come with a price, for sure. But, my impression, I started DevOps.com 7.5 more years ago, was that testing was one of the success stories in DevOps, right? DevOps is a lot about automation and speed. And certainly we've seen test automation and speed of testing. I mean, quite frankly, it's a big part of Tricentis's market, go to market, is doing more faster, automating more. And we certainly are releasing software faster. And is the quality perfect? No, but I wonder, or I would put forth the proposition that it's far from perfect, but the quality of our software releases today, I think, is better than it's ever been. Does anyone on my panel disagree with that?
A little bit.
Go ahead.
So I feel like there's been a lot of maybe overcorrecting, thinking, well, since testing is so slow, let's get everybody automating, and then we can automate everything, and then everything will be faster. It's like, okay, well, you can run automated tests faster than you can manual test, but you're missing the exploratory testing, and you're missing all of that stuff that is like the stuff that if I think of a test case and I can automate it, then that's fine. But if there's something slightly out from that my automated script doesn't catch, then that's a bug that's going to go to production or whatever if I don't actually test it. So I feel like it feels like, yes, we've got releases coming out like every week or every 2 weeks or whatever, and everything's grand and whatever. But I also feel like you can tell the companies that have gotten rid of QA by the quality of their stuff. Like, I got this app on my phone and it's like, oh, I got another release. What crap am I going to find this time? Because they just push it through the pipelines that are all automated and nobody's actually looked at it.
Yeah, I have to agree very strongly with Hillary. I think that there's this, and I've been hearing this since I started in tech. Everyone's moving towards automation. Everyone's moving towards automation. Everybody's been moving towards automation since I started. And that's great. And I do think automation plays a big role. I think if you're not unit testing, you've got a big problem. If you're not writing integration tests, if you're not having some sort of front end, coverage in your QA with automated tests, then you're missing something. But also, if you don't have manual testers to some degree who can do that exploratory testing, because let me tell you, when you're writing automated tests, they're only as intelligent or unintelligent as you make them. They can only do what you tell them. You don't have a human component there to, try to be somebody who doesn't understand, a website very well. They can't take care of usability testing. They can't necessarily take care of, to a certain extent, but they can't always cover the security issues that you might find in somebody who is more intelligent than a system and how you built it. So I just, automate smartly, right? Automate in the right way, so you're not spending most of your time just dealing with flaky specs and you're still missing out on all of the usability benefit that you get from a manual tester.
Miriam and Hillary, I think one of the things that you're also pointing out is there's a different mindset as a tester than you are as a developer. And so writing your own automated tests are helpful, but you're not going to think about the ways you to break your own software. You're just too close to it. And so I think that's one of the missing elements of let's just automate everything. Well, what about that different approach to, and that's what you're talking about, the experimental testing also. As a developer, I think you want, that's probably what Abel, you were saying your lesson was, I actually like you people. I want you to test my stuff because please save me from myself, right? So that may be what we're missing in this whole, and I'm a big believer in automation, but that is definitely easy to overlook, let me say, and easy to undervalue, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love my QA teams, right? So when I first started code, I'm your typical developer, right? So when I first started writing code, I literally viewed my QA teams as my enemy, right? We were fighting all the time. And it took me quite a bit of maturation to finally realize, wow, they're my best line of defense. They are the people keeping me from looking like a complete idiot to the general public, right? So now QA is my best friend. But I love these stories of automation because Microsoft went down that exact same route, right? When we first started trying to increase our velocity, our first thought was, okay, the way we do quality is the same as everybody else, especially back in the 90s, early 2000s, full end-to-end functional testing, right? And that could take weeks, that could take months. And for products like, I don't know, as big as Windows, it could take over a year to run through all the scripts. It's absolutely nuts. And so we were like, okay, we got a brilliant idea. Let's automate everything. So we did, and we threw money at the problem because we can do that. And we hired a bunch of contractors. They created all these automated tests for us, and we ran them, right? And then they ran and ran and ran, and they ran for freaking ever, because even automated UI tests take a really long time. But the worst part is we were getting all these broken tests, and we're like, no, we know that works. Let's run it again. And all of a sudden, those would turn green, but other tests would turn red. And the very sad fact is automated UI tests are crazy fragile, especially when you start dealing with modern architectures like microservices and stuff. And the more layers of dependencies you have, the flakier your tests become, to the point where we no longer run full end-to-end automated UI tests, except for like happy path stuff, because otherwise they're way too flaky. The funny story is, as long as I've been an engineer at Microsoft, never seen all of our automated UI tests turn green. So because of that, they kind of turned completely useless because no one paid attention to them anymore. So yes, automation plays a massive factor, but you have to use them strategically and carefully.
Well, and you can't automate subjectivity, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so the fact is you need testing manually to a degree to make sure that, one, you're expanding the set of testing and really stressing the system, right? But also, hey, I walked through this workflow, and on paper it kind of makes sense, but as I walk through it, it makes no sense. The user isn't going to like this. I don't like it. Let's change it. I mean, a human being needs to be able to make those kinds of decisions. You can't automate that. The other thing I find interesting about automation, especially when it comes to testing, is it's always perceived to have you go faster, right? And I don't see necessarily automation as a goal of going faster. I see automation as a way to be more efficient in how you go about the testing of your software, but it doesn't necessarily make you go faster. It can free up people to do other kinds of testing that maybe that are of more value. But to go faster, I don't necessarily see that correlation, and I also don't necessarily think that software engineering is a race.
Well,
Right? I mean,
Yeah, I would agree with
there's
that.
no end.
Yeah, I would say that part of it, the challenge with automation, and I do think depending on the platform, in certain instances we're getting better, right? You're going to need that exploratory testing, you're going to need that manual testing, but is always that goalpost is moving. And what I mean by that goalpost is we've got new development languages popping up, we've got new platforms, we've got new frameworks. So once you start building automation for one, something new pops up, as Abel talked about with microservices and all these different cloud components and cloud native applications. So it makes it difficult to build that consistent automation when the technology is constantly evolving and changing and being, ripped and replaced as you're trying to, basically trying to change the tire on the plane while it's in the air, right? So that's what I see happening with a lot of QA organizations. So I think we're maturing and we're getting better in terms of how we're addressing automation, but I think the fundamentals don't go away. You still need that exploratory testing. You still need those subject matter experts to be able to manually understand what is happening and to have realistic expectations when you're doing automation, as you talked about, Adam.
I think it's also really important you're understanding the strengths of each person and each role, right? I love the separation of development and QA. I worked in a place where they tried to combine it. That's how I became a software developer. It was kind of a disaster, let's be honest. I shouldn't be testing all of my own code. I'm from QA. I have that background, but when you're developing, you're not the right person to try to break your own code. You have a natural bias for that. So I think it's really important to also acknowledge those differences and have that collaboration between development and QA to understand, how do we most efficiently test something? What can actually be a unit test? Do we really need a front-end test for this? Like, to echo Abel, minimize what you're testing on the front end, and QA might not always be the best equipped to understand that. So it's important that you keep that communication open between QA and development.
Fair enough. So, you know, I recently, someone pointed out a survey to me recently, and it kind of shocked me, is that, you know, the automated testing is accounted for about 25% of testing, and that hasn't changed in a fairly long time. It's remained pretty consistent. So for all of the talk about automation and test automation, and I will tell you, our questions from the audience are going wild. I got to bring some of these in soon. A lot of them are about automation too. But for all of the oxygen we give test automation, it accounts for 25% of our testing, no more, no less. Why haven't we seen that? Why has that remained so stable? Why hasn't that changed? Or is the survey crazy and it has changed?
I don't think
I'd be interested to see if that includes like unit tests. Like if automated tests that you think of are just UI tests, then yeah, well, mine have gone down from 25%. But if you're including unit tests, then I think that doesn't make sense. I think at least for my teams, unit tests have gone way up, and the other layers of tests may have stayed the same, except for UI tests have gone down. Because we're covering more that we need to at the lower levels. And I will write, you know, all day I will write API tests, integration tests before I'll write UI tests, because those have more value and they're less fragile, and I don't have to worry about all of the different frickin' browsers. Like there's so much value there. So I think maybe the survey it needs to be more clear on what they mean by automated tests. It's just my experience.
Fair.
Yeah, I agree with Hillary, because just on one product alone, so I was on the Azure DevOps Services team, and every single check-in that we did, every developer check-in has to go through a pull request, right? And that pull request, or a code review, and that code review is going to kick off a build, which compiles everything, and it runs all of our L0 and L1 tests, which are more or less, L0 are pure unit tests with no dependencies, so everything is mocked out. L1 test means there's one layer of dependency, so maybe it depends on AD, or maybe it depends on, so you still don't need to build everything out, but it has one layer of dependency. And then, you know, it goes all the way up to L4. L4 is a full-blown integration test where the entire environment is built out, right? So we run all of our L0 and L1 tests, every developer check-in. Last time I looked, which was what, 2 days ago, has to run 28,000 unit tests just to check the code in. And we run all of those in about 3 minutes right now. So has automated testing gone up? For us, if you count unit tests, it's gone way up. But like Hillary said, though, our automated UI test, that we do that much more strategically.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I work in a product group today that, you know, we've been increasing automated testing, you know, and shifting left significantly. And we actually follow a very, very similar model where you know, L0, L1, and we have the similar notion of bronze, silver, gold, right? But generally speaking, it's the same kind of thing. And our unit tests are increasing dramatically, and we're building more confidence early on so that we can change the kinds of testing we're doing later on, right? So we don't have to perform, you know, basic fundamental testing. Hey, does this, you know, does this low level function work? Because we know it does, right? So we know that we've proven to ourselves that works with our earlier sets of testing. So we can invest in other kinds of testing later on that are of more value, right? And so definitely, you know, to the 25%, I don't know if that number is right. I mean, if you exclude unit testing, maybe, but, you know, nominal unit testing and functional testing takes up a significant amount of overall automated testing. And, you know, I would like Hillary, I would better understand where that 25% comes from.
I'm actually not sure that we're all a little bit biased, right? I mean, yes, we work in organizations where there are automated tests, but I've worked in organizations where there were not even unit tests.
Oh, wow.
So I'm not convinced that that 20% is not including unit tests. There are definitely organizations, you know, I think maybe we're all very lucky, and I'm glad to be lucky in that sense. But, you know, there are a lot of organizations who really have still not invested in automation, even in unit testing, which seems crazy to most of us, right? But it does happen.
Yeah, you are totally right. Because I 100% live in a bubble, but when I go talk to our customers and stuff, there are many people that don't write unit tests. There are still people that don't use a source control system, right? And that kind of makes my head explode. I'm like, what? But it happens. So yeah, I live in a bubble.
I'm curious,
Yeah,
is that a difference between product organizations tend to do more of this, richer testing versus the regular IT group, or is it sort of across the board? It can be anybody that does it. Any sense of that?
Yeah, I think from what I've seen, it's for product organizations, they will do more of they'll typically do more of the unit testing, the low-level API testing. And it makes sense, just as Hillary brought up. I think that some organizations, the focus has always been heavily, at least in the early days of test automation, on the UI, right? And make understanding changes on the UI. But I think as we start to evolve, especially with DevOps best practices, you're looking at different product companies that are focusing on that API level as well as the unit testing level. And then you have to look at those organizations, especially the enterprise organizations that are working with the package apps like your ServiceNows, of SAPs of the world, or even Salesforce.com, where those are mostly like the low code, no code type of application. So when you start creating those customizations, on those platforms, then the type of testing that you do is very different than what you would do if you were just doing a pure, from scratch cloud native application that you're developing. So I think it really depends on the type of organization, what you're releasing. And yeah, I definitely think the product organizations do things a lot, differently than you would see in some of the custom platforms that are out there today.
Fair enough. Abel, I wanted to mention Abbas out in the audience, right? Loved your comment about, after a while, everyone stopped paying attention to automated testing. But how do you fix that? Is there a fix? If you don't know one, that's okay too, but have you come up with anything that kind of addresses that?
So what we ended up doing was we shifted our focus away from end-to-end functional testing, right? Especially with automation, because it just didn't make any sense. And we really shifted our efforts towards unit testing and writing unit tests that make sense, right? And so every couple of weeks, we actually sit there and comb through our unit tests very carefully. Well, one of the things is we want to make sure they run really quickly, right? And when you start talking about 20, 30, 40, 50,000 unit tests, even that can start taking crazy amounts of time. So we have a rule in place, which is our unit tests no matter how many we have, they cannot take over 8 minutes. And if it gets close to 8 minutes, we need to start looking through our tests, and we need to throw away tests that are stupid, that just, great, my getters and setters. Oh, let me write a unit test for that. Oh, of course those work, right? There's no logic going on there. So why are we wasting time doing things like that? Or, okay, here's a test that's trying to do a lot of stuff and it's taking a long time. Why is it taking a long time? Let's break it down and make it run much more efficiently, right? So that has helped us tremendously. And when I start saying things like this, right, where our focus is now on unit testing versus end-to-end functional testing, people are always like, do you guys just do no QA testing at all? And it's like, no, we do. But we're kind of a special case, right? Because we literally use our own tools every day just to do our jobs, right? So like the Office 365 team, we use Office every single day just in our normal work. So when we release our product, we release it through Ring. We don't want to release it to the world. Otherwise, if there's one bug, great, we've just broke absolutely everybody, right? So at least with the Azure DevOps Services team, what we did was we would release it to Ring 0 first, which was our own engineering team. So we would sit in our Ring for about 2 to 3 days, And as every day goes by, we are literally using it to do our jobs. We are our own testers. We are our own exploratory testers. And if metrics are going down, if too many exceptions are flying or things like that, or even if I see a bug, we can easily stop that release and it doesn't go on to the rest of the world, right? So we collapsed our engineering team or our dev teams and our QA testers because of the weird circumstances that we have. I don't expect most people to do that. I mean, most people don't get to dog feed their own application before it goes out to the rest of the world, right? So there's definitely a need, a huge need for exploratory testing and things like that. But again, from our official testing perspective, we shifted a lot of that effort into unit testing.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about who the testers are. You know, but there's 3 or 4 different questions in the queue here that talk about who should be doing the testing. Have we shifted, you know, especially in agile teams and DevOps environments, have we shifted responsibility for testing? Are there quote unquote testers within those teams? You know, and that seems to be part of the confusion and part of the problem. I'm going to ask Miriam and Hillary as 2 real life doing it right now testers, right? How do you answer those questions? What's the right mix? What's the right roles? Who's doing the testing?
Well, I do think it should be shared. If there's just one person or one role doing testing, then you've done something wrong, right? It should be a collaboration. QA should be responsible for that. They should be owners of quality, but that doesn't mean that they are the ones executing everything that ensures quality, right? You know, developers as well should be involved in that. And going back to what I said earlier, that collaboration between QA and development is essential. You know, deciding what can be automated where and in what way really empowers both QA and development to, you know, QA in one hand, if they're not as technically inclined, to better understand what can be covered in unit tests and to be able to kind of, you know, see that journey through. And then development as well gets the benefit of QA kind of understanding what needs to be tested. So I do think QA and development need to play a strong role, with QA kind of owning that test strategy, right? And development supporting in with their technical knowledge.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Being like the only tester, even though so my title used to be senior software engineer in test, and now I'm just senior software engineer. My company got rid of the in test role, so I like to say that that's implied because that's my my subject area of expertise. And so of all of these software engineers on my team, I'm the one that is like the test SME, the subject matter expert, but I'm not the only one doing testing. I'm not writing all of their unit tests. I'm not you know, the one that's especially for all of the applications that I support, I can't be the only one to do that. So we definitely work together. But having a person that's dedicated to like the tester's mindset and like what needs to be done, I think is vital. We've had other teams that don't have any testers whatsoever or anyone dedicated to testing on their teams. Like, what do we do? How do we fix this? How do we fix our quality issues? And the answer is dedicate someone to at least having that as their focus. Like if you're like, you know, all of the developers have like 20% of their focus is on testing, no, that's not going to happen. And stuff's not going to get tested properly, especially if they're like, well, I think I should test my thing like this, and then they test it like that and everything works, happy path, yay. But then it goes to prod and it's broken because no one was able to kind of challenge that and you know, provide other ideas. So I think there is that kind of everyone should be a full stack engineer on a team kind of idea, which I hate because I think everyone has their specializations, they have their focus. Like I have not been in testing for 13 years just so I can write a website that everybody hates because I'm terrible. Like I can write an automation script way better than that. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I agree with Miriam, and we need at least someone dedicated to that kind of a mindset, because we do think differently than developers. Like I came in to this team and one of the devs wrote some UI tests and we kind of broke them down together because they weren't all that great. They were testing all of these things that just should not be tested, and he had all of these hard weights in there, and I was like, what are you doing? Like, because he didn't know, because that's not his role. So I don't know, I'll just tangent on this for another hour if you want, but I'm gonna stop.
Yeah. Anybody else want to comment on that beyond the quote unquote testers here?
Yeah, I would say that one of the things that I've, before I worked for a vendor, and it's funny working for a vendor, I'll probably get my wrist slapped for saying this, but you really have to, for QA organizations or just software development, in general, you have to look beyond the tools. And I think a lot of times there's a heavy focus on what tool are we going to use to solve this problem in testing. And I think organizations, and we did this at a company I worked with about 7 years ago, is we stepped back and said, okay, let's look at our organization. Let's look at the skill sets that we have in here. Then once we kind of understand who we have, what their strengths are, then we can decide what tools or solutions we need to augment our processes. So once we did that, it took the burden off of saying, you must use this, or thou shalt use this tool, or you cannot work in this organization. So it becomes more of stepping back and really understanding who you have in those organizations, because you will have some extremely sharp subject matter experts in test that will find things that those automation engineers won't even come close to finding. So if you can, utilize those skill sets and utilize the strengths of your team, it's going to become so much easier. And then you can determine, okay, what do they need to be successful? Then I can supplement or augment that team with the proper tooling and solutions.
Well, and it's a major, yeah, I was going to say, and that's a major tenet of agile development, right? I mean, it's all about people and interactions over processes and tools, and so that those interactions that you have with people in testing or who are specializing in testing is absolutely critical as a developer, right? And you need to be able to, interactions aren't sharing a functional specification between each other, right? Or it's about sitting down and walking through, okay, well, here's what we wrote, how should it be tested, and then go about, talking about how it should function and work. And those interactions are critically important. And it goes back to people having specific roles and specific specialties, and then being able to work together to drive a product forward, right?
I think one of the things, in addition to really good thoughts around roles and people's skills, and ultimately it's always about people, right? Forgive me for forgetting, someone mentioned strategy. And I think that's a good thing to help the team pull together one of the roles that a test lead or even development lead can play. Because that can map out, yes, here's how we're going to do unit testing, and we're going to do UI testing, functional testing, integration testing. The typical things we might do. What do we think about security testing or performance testing, canary type things? Maybe you don't get to all of that right away, but you kind of have a roadmap of how we're going to mature as a team or evolve as a team in our test strategy. And you could paint a bit of a picture so everybody knows where we're going. So when we're ready to start doing some limited performance testing or more involved behavioral testing, whatever it might be, that's sort of in everybody's mind of, yeah, that's where we're headed. And thanks a lot for helping us paint that out, because now I have a feel, I understand why we're going there.
Yeah.
I think just one more point, because I've experienced this in the past, that the QA person or whoever is dedicated to this testing mindset thing should be embedded on the team. Having these pods of testers that kind of get lent out to different projects, that means that you can't be there from the beginning. You can't be in all of those planning meetings and all of those, small interactions, even remotely. My team has been fully remote for 2.5 years or whatever. So we still have those little interactions of, should this product do this? No, I think it should do this. It's like, okay, well, that's how I'm going to implement it. Like, we, as testers, we need to be there the whole time.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So the original question was who should do the testing? When Microsoft started off on this DevOps journey where we had to transform absolutely everything, we had a mantra which was quality is every engineer's responsibility. And that kind of made my head explode because as a dev, I was like, are you freaking kidding me? I don't do quality. I don't have the DNA. I can't, I'm just not designed to do this. I'm bad at it. And yeah, Microsoft literally sent me to classes, right? They educated me on how, even as a developer, especially as a developer, how I have to pay attention to quality from day one, right? So it is everybody's responsibility, but I fully agree with everybody else that we need the QA people's expertise because I only see Happy Path. I have no idea how real people use my app. I just use it the way I designed it, right? So I need all the help I can get.
Great. Guys, man, the time goes so quick. We have a great panel. We have all these questions. We haven't discussed the role of AI, maybe ML, in this new world of DevOps enabled and testing, and that's how it plays into that. And it's important, whether we're talking about automation or just doing better testing. So again, I'm going to turn to Miriam and Hillary and ask you two to kick off. Has AI and ML already started to play a role in your jobs and in your organizations and in the way you folks are doing testing?
Personally, to be honest, no, it has not.
Okay.
It's it's this.
No,
Yes,
that's great.
everybody, wants that to be a thing. It has not really been introduced in anywhere that I've worked at yet. So, I mean, I'm excited if it works out well and it's actually as amazing as I've heard that it should be, but not yet.
So unfortunately,
Hillary?
I'm the same. I work on internal applications that other software development teams use. So we'll do, does it work on Chrome and Firefox? Kind of, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Because because it's not going to the general public, we have less focus on all of those kind of like the AI, UI differences, pixel differences, or whatever stuff. But I do know that some of the publicly facing product teams at my company have used things like Applitools and stuff like that. I have no experience with it, so I can't tell you if it's good or bad or helped them or hasn't. I have no clue whatsoever. So I'm out of this conversation.
Yeah, I can kind of give you a, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I had actually tried out Applitools. We haven't actually integrated that into our system. And it is an interesting concept. I love the tool. There's really a lot of great stuff that they've built into it. It's nice to have that visual regression and for it to also be intelligent about what the changes are. There are tools that are like pixel to pixel comparisons, and those are flaky and prone to errors, and you're constantly, looking for something that shifted 1 pixel, but it actually didn't. Anyways, it's a whole mess. But Applitool is, I found that it's a lot more reliable. It's definitely something that, we would look to, try out and see how that fits into our system. Because I do think visual regression, if it's done in an intelligent way, can be really valuable.
Yeah, and Tricentis, we recently released our artificial intelligence solution called Vision AI. But I think if you start looking at just AI and test automation, it's still at its infancy. It's still very early. So what you're seeing is really this evolution of making testing easier as possible. And I think that's what we're going now. And it's not a panacea. I think still trying to understand, because right now it's just a great buzzword for testing, right? AI, machine learning, self-healing, right? So I'm a marketer, so I can say that, right? So, but it's one of those things where it's real. So it's not just snake oil, it's actually real technology. So there are a lot of great vendors out there where we're putting in, we're adding machine learning. And, we have data scientists, on our teams, and we're actually building that out. So I think the testing world is going to get there. I think it's baby steps, but it's not a replacement. It's not a panacea yet. It's basically there to help augment what we have. You talked about like companies like Aptly Tools and being able to, so you have to look at, okay, if I'm an organization that's using Selenium or Appium, how can I embed any type of machine learning and artificial intelligence into my scripts to make them better? So we're still at that early stage because, again, you're kind of still at the mercy of how those initial tests are written, and are those neural networks that are used to really comprise and do that learning or the training of the application, how smart are they getting for these various applications and these various platforms across the board? So I think it's important, and we're getting there. We're not there yet, but that's where the industry is going. And I think it's going to play a huge part, especially because it's happening on the dev side as well. So a lot of the dev tools are having AI built in. So it's just a matter of time for all the testing solutions to have it built in.
So I actually use Aptly Tools, and it's freaking awesome. I love it. It's so this is a funny story. When we talk about the pixel by pixel comparison, I think it was Miriam that brought it up. So we tried that at Microsoft too. We built our own pixel by pixel comparison. Oh my God, it just breaks all the time. The false negatives, positive, whatever you get is just, it's ridiculous. Apparently the exact same JPEG is going to trigger a false flag. Exact same one. Why? I have no idea, but pixel by pixel does not work. So I was very leery of Aptly Tools when they came to me, but they're like, hey, try this out. And I'm like, oh, this is gonna be awful. But it really works, and it works very well. So again, it's not to replace human beings, but it does catch things. If we do run, we run a lot of automated UI tests, like for Happy Path stuff, right? It's going to catch these weird CSS errors that we have, right? And those types of stuff, it's phenomenal. And every little bit of help that we can get within our pipelines, I'm all about it, right? So I do use them, and they're really cool. So people should check it out.
Okay. Maybe we should have got them to sponsor this too. I don't know. But in any event, guys, we are bumping up on the top of the hour. I got a couple of little housekeeping things I got to do here. First of all, we always give out a bunch of Amazon gift cards to people who come in and sit in on our webinars. Today's winners of Amazon gift cards are Bob B, Judith L, Kyle K, and Sharon O. Our team will reach out to you and, yeah, I guess email you your gift cards. Secondly, I'm not kidding you, we must have 24 to 3, well, we knocked a bunch of them out, because as we hit those areas, I deleted them, but we still have 12 or more questions that we didn't answer. I'm going to ask my team if we can get those into a spreadsheet, get that out to our panel members. If any of you feel so inclined to help these folks out with their answers. We had a lot of comments, a lot of violent agreement, with what we were saying, but some of the questions deserve some answers if we could do that. And then lastly, Adam, Miriam, Mitchell, Hillary, Clint, and Abel, thank you so much for joining us today. This was an amazing webinar. Unfortunately, we should have done a 3-hour session, and we still wouldn't touch on everything. But for 1 hour, I think we fit as much as we could in there. So thank you all for coming in and participating. Big shout out, thank you to Tricentis. They do automated testing. They're probably one of the leaders, or they are one of the leaders in the testing space in the world today. And thank you for sponsoring this and sponsoring DevOps Unbound. But that's going to kick it for now, guys. Until our next roundtable of a month from now. This is Alan Schimmel for MediaOps. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon at another webinar. Hey guys, and for those of you celebrating, happy Thanksgiving. Be safe, be well, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.